This is a story of Tellico Dam created by the Tennessee Valley Authority to dam the Little Tennessee River. The Tellico Dam is one of the few major multipurpose projects that has an original project allocation for economic development and recreation, basically meaning the only reason for this dam was to create a town around the flooded reservoir. The dam would also would help produce some hydroelectric power, not through Tellico Dam itself, but by diverting a piece of the Little Tennessee River to Fort Loudon Dam to add 23 megawatts of power, which is quite insignificant. Basically, the TVA wanted to build this dam on the Little Tennessee River, flood the valley behind it. This would allow the TVA to buy up all the land that would be flooded by the reservoir and surrounding the new shoreline, and then sell it back to whatever industry would come into the area to live nearby its town that TVA wanted to create called Tellico Village. There was some slight interest by Boeing Corporation, who was interested in possibly putting a headquarters there. History will tell this never happened, and it was nothing more than a fleeting interest. Despite that, this was enough reason for TVA to proceed with the plans. The people who would be flooded and displaced were obviously not pleased about Tellico Dam, which would destroy their river, which was one of the last rivers that was mostly undammed. I believe there's just one dam on the Little Tennessee River at this time. They opposed it. Also, the Cherokee Indians opposed the dam because this was their ancestral homeland, which would be flooded by the TVA. It was a site of Chota, which was a town of theirs, and there are many archaeological sites that would be flooded. Archaeologists fervently tried to dig up as much as they could, and they found evidence of human civilization as far back as 10,000 years, which all would be flooded by Tellico Dam. Because the only reason for Tellico Dam was economic and industrial development, the residents who were displeased with the dam created their own development plan, an alternative. What they wanted to do was create a Cherokee Indian tourist trail, which would follow the Cherokee historical sites all the way to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. And for them, they thought this was a better use of their river and their valley. Despite this opposition by locals, the TVA proceeded with support from Congress. And they did that until the snail darter was found in the Little Tennessee River. So this happened, and TVA had its first roadblock in completion of its ill-conceived dam. The first court, the district court, ruled for Tellico Dam's completion, citing the Congress's continual funding of the dam implied that Tellico Dam was exempt from the Endangered Species Act. Upon this news, the TVA, which was appealed, the TVA hastened its construction and tried to capture as many snail darters as it could and relocate them to watersheds. This decision was obviously appealed, and it was taken up by the U.S. Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, which reversed and granted an injunction deferring to the plain language of the Endangered Species Act, and found that adopting a utilitarian balancing test of the societal costs of construction versus extinction would exceed the power of the court. As such, the court found that the completeness of the dam or the money spent was legally irrelevant. So basically, this halted construction for now. The TVA appealed the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court, in a 6-3 decision, said the language in the ESA was clear and the snail darter's critical habitat was protected. So this was a big win for the ESA and the opposition of Tellico Dam. This, however, did not stop Congress from trying to circumvent the ESA. What they did was make an amendment which created a committee, which became known as the God Committee, to review times when the ESA rubbed elbows with a major project such as Tellico Dam. The God Committee would compose of the Secretary of Interior, Agriculture, Army, as well as administrators of the Environmental Protection Agency, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, and a representative from the state where the conflict occurred. So this committee convened, and they ruled for Tellico Dam to not be completed, even though at this time it was 95% complete. And what's significant about their ruling is that it had nothing to do with the snail darter per se, and had everything to do with the economic ludicrous or absurdity of Tellico Dam. And they stated that the dam would lose 76 cents for every dollar spent. So this should have ended the Tellico Dam's construction cold, even though it's 95% complete. It was a big win for the ESA, for opposition in general, and it should have stayed that way if Congressman Duncan would have accepted his defeat quietly, but he did not. He went to an underhanded method, and what he decided to do was appeal, uh, sneak an amendment into the appropriations bill. So one day in Congress, it was actually June 18th, 1979, on the House floor, Congressman Duncan came in saying, Mr. Speaker, I have an amendment to offer to the Public Works Appropriations Bill. There's Tom Bevel and John Myers, who were both members of the Appropriations Committee there at that time, and they vouched for the bill, the amendment, and there a voice vote occurred, and the amendment proposed by Congressman Duncan was put in the appropriations bill. What that amendment contained, however, was an exemption for Tellico Dam from all laws that would prohibit its completion. Um, this was debated fiercely afterwards, but once in, it was unable to muster up the support by congressmen to vote it out. And now President Carter was the only stop between Tellico Dam's completion and not. So let's go to President Carter, and everyone thought for sure he would veto it. But at this time, President Carter was in the midst of a Panama Canal Treaty, and he needed the votes to secure his treaty to give back Panama Canal to Panama. He thought if he vetoed it, he would lose his treaty, and if he just accepted it, he would get his treaty. So, with President Carter backed into a somewhat corner, he signed the appropriations bill into law, and Tellico Dam was completed with its gates closed November 29th, 1979, in a rather underhanded way by the Congressman Duncan there. The good news is the snail darter was not, deemed extinct. Was not extinct by the completion of the dam. The efforts to relocate the snail darter to other watersheds were successful, and it is still alive today. The Cherokee Indians' native lands, ancestral lands, however, were inundated and are lost. And with that is the story of Tellico Dam.